Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Appleton Historical Society, welcome. Thank you for sharing your Thursday evening with us. Through our partnership with the Appleton Public Library, I'd like to present Lambeau Ladies, the boundary-breaking women behind Lombardi's Packers. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Counter.
Thank you, Mark. I'm your host tonight. I appreciate you all coming. What a great facility this is. Mary Beth, where are you? I know she's in here. Right, Mary Beth, what a place. Wow. Thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce a couple of dignitaries, if I could. We have Brown County Judge Don Zeitmolder with us. Don, would you stand, please? Don's dad played for the Packers. He was a tailback in the National Football League for Green Bay from 1929 to 1931. So welcome. Also with us tonight, retired Outagamie County Judge John Desjardins. John. Welcome. John is on the chain gang for the Green Bay Packers and has been for how many years, John?
25 years.
25 years, wow. And his grandfather was on the original Packer team in 1919. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. On behalf of the Appleton Historical Museum, which, by the way, is a hop, skip, and a jump from here, and they have a great football exhibit right now, including a jersey and a little bit about Ron Kostelnik in there, but area high school teams, college teams, go check it out if you can. It's really classy. Packers legendary coach Vince Lombardi was quoted in Life magazine as saying, "Happy wives make for happy football players." He said this after purchasing expensive mink stoles for all the players' wives and mothers of the single players to celebrate their 1961 championship. There you see it. Tonight we honor the Packer wives of that era with the launch of a new book titled Lambeau Ladies. Little background on the authors of Lambeau Ladies. Laura Kostelnik Biskupic was a sports writer and wrote about the Packers in a Where Are They Now series in the Appleton Post-Crescent. She taught high school journalism, worked as a marketing director, and since 2013 has hosted a very popular blog. The daughter of Green Bay Packers Hall of Famer Ron Kostelnik, Laura grew up in the shadows of Lambeau Field under the watchful eyes of the Packer wives. Today she resides in Appleton. Her daughter, Katherine Biskupic, is a comedy writer based in Los Angeles, via the Midwest, of course. Trained at Second City, she won the top award at the Works by Women Fest before moving to Los Angeles and selling a sports comedy pilot to Audible. She has performed at venues from New York to Seattle, and her videos have been featured on Funny or Die, Vulture, Up Rocks, and USA Today. Maybe she'll have a few jokes for us tonight, too. As the granddaughter of Ron Kostelnik, she roots for the Packers all the way from California. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laura and Katherine and their stories about the Lambeau Ladies.
Thank you so much. We really want to thank the Appleton Public Library, the Appleton Historical Society. We've loved working with your teams. And we want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. My mom loves a crowded table, and this just feels like a big Appleton crowded table, so thank you so much. We're going to talk about the origin of this project and then share some of our favorite stories. Then we'll play a little game, and then we'll take some questions if you have them. And so, Mom, kick it away. I'm going to scoot to the side.
Are we going to play there?
We're going to start with a trailer we have for this project.
Welcome to Lambeau Ladies, stories from the team behind the team. The team being the greatest team in the history of the NFL. And the team behind the team being the team nutritionists, agents, financial advisors, schedulers, child rearers, also known as the wives. we'll be sharing stories of how the Lambeau Ladies lived it with strength.
You can't imagine sitting out in the ice bowl.
Humor.
I went to the dry cleaners and she says, "Oh, Mrs. Hart, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you without your husband's uniform on."
Versatility.
Spring Dance was a man's world to me back then.
Love.
I was pretty much in love with Forrest, so I would probably move to the moon with him.
And friendship.
Really, I think of friends. They're really more like family.
I'm Laura Kostelnik Biskupic.
And I'm Katherine Biskupic.
Join us.
Thank you very much. So I would work with my daughter. My dad was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1960, and his rookie year was in 1961. And those dates are important because he was only 20 years old when he received his first NFL contract, so he legally couldn't sign it. My grandmother, the indomitable Bubba Kostelnik, had to co-sign the contract. And she wouldn't. She stood there in the sturdy living room of her company house in Culver, Pennsylvania, and refused to sign that contract. Phil Bankston, who was then the defensive coordinator for the Packers, had to talk her into it. Eventually, she did decide to sign the contract that changed my dad's life. He spent 8 years with the Packers, from 1961 through the 1960s. That is Ronnie. 1961 through 1968, and then the 1969 season he played for Baltimore. Those were pivotal years for the Packers and for the NFL as well. And I don't think anybody, except maybe a media-savvy Italian we all know, as Lombardi, I don't think anybody else understood the historical impact of those years. I don't think my dad did either. But he did understand how important that time and those events were to him. And we know that because he took a lot of pictures, and he had a little movie camera too. He took film. So we have these great film clips of the guys at Disneyland. The week of the Super Bowl, they went to Disneyland, and he's got these big guys on these rides. And we have Ronnie Pitts and Elijah Pitts playing on the floor of our living room when Ronnie was a baby. Great little film clips. And then, next slide, please. My dad took these pictures. So this is the plane on the way to the first Super Bowl. That is Marie and Vince Lombardi. And then the middle picture is the gentleman on the way to the game. And then this last picture is Vince and Marie Lombardi attending church the morning of the Super Bowl. My dad was raised by a strong woman, and he married a strong woman, my mom, Peggy. And he understood that strong women were an asset to a family and to a team. And we know this because he didn't just take pictures of the players, he took pictures of the wives too. So that is a picture my dad took of Ruth Ann Skowronski. And the middle one is Ruth and Elijah Pitts and my mom and Dave Hanner. And this right here is Pat Cochran. She is a coach's wife. Back then, the coach's wives could ride the planes to the games, and then the families could ride with their husbands on the way home.
My origin with this story is, sadly, my grandpa passed away when I was only 3.5, so I didn't get to know him very well. That's a picture of us right over there playing seesaw. But I got to go to the reunions and learn so much more about him and his friends. And what I remember is my older brother Charlie would have his Packer hat, and he would go around and he would get the autographs of the players, Bart Starr, Willie Davis, Jerry Kramer. But I saw these elegant women, and they carried themselves with such class, I thought they must be famous. So as a little girl, I took my Packer hat and went around and got all of their autographs. That's me in the middle in my Packer hat that has Cherry Starr, Ruth Pitts, Kostelnik on it. And I knew very early I wanted to learn more about these ladies and that I had great respect for them. Next slide.
So we often refer to the Packers as the greatest team in the history of the NFL.
In our unbiased opinions.
And of course, because they are. But one of the reasons they are, I think, is because they honor their history so well. They were one of the first teams to have their own Hall of Fame, and they also host reunions. And it was at one of those reunions, the reunion of the 50th reunion of the first Super Bowl team, that I found myself in the lobby with Ruth Pitts, Vicki Aldridge Nelson, and my mom, because the Packers didn't just invite the players to these reunions, they invited their wives, and to that one, they invited the widows as well, which I just thought was so kind. But anyway, there was a gap in the schedule, and I said to the ladies, let's take a little drive through Green Bay. I suggested this little trip through memory lane because a few weeks earlier, my mom and I had stopped at our old house on 905 South Fisk Street. It backed right into Colburn Park, and every house on the street had kids in it. So it was a great little childhood while my dad was playing. And there was a woman outside the house, and she offered to give us a little tour. And we were so tickled by two things. One is that they had converted the basement into a Packer bar. And she said, you know, a Packer used to live here. And I said, I know that guy. He was married to her. And the second thing we were very tickled about is that there was a screened-in porch in the back that my dad built with his teammate and friend Jim Weatherax. And we just thought that was so great that it was still standing there. So anyway, I suggested to the ladies we take a little tour through Green Bay. And one of the places we stopped was on Lori Lane at the Village Apartments. And this is Vicki and Ruth that day. And they started telling the story of their time in Green Bay, but particularly in this apartment complex, which was run by a woman named Flo Bettis. And their story was so full of pathos and humor and strength and a sense of joy. And surrounding all of that, this friendship was a theme. And so I knew there was a nucleus of a story there.
My mom wrote a blog about it, and then when we decided to do this project, I said, let's do all the interviews. We conducted over 30 interviews, and I knew I wanted to write with my mom. She's my favorite writer, and she comes from a sports journalism background, and I'm from a comedy background, and I knew these women were very funny and loved to have fun. And when we were learning about Flo Bettis, it was a fascinating story because she was an apartment manager and this kind Catholic mother in the 1960s, and she found out that some of the black players were having trouble finding housing, and she was appalled. So she put up listings all over town saying she had open units, and then she contacted Vince Lombardi and said she would rent to any player who needed it. But she wasn't just an apartment manager, she created a community. Her house was right next door to the apartment complex, and her husband had built a bar in his house, like these great Wisconsinites. And so the players would have these long days, and then they would unwind at the Betis family bar. And the Betis house was also down the street from a rectory, and the priests at the end of the day would come and also have a drink there. So when we interviewed Flo's children, she said that there would be Packer players there, priests, and the Betis family, and they would call them Packer Holy Roller Parties. And she said during those years, Coach Lombardi kept a curfew, and so he would call Flo sometimes, and he'd say, Florence, is everyone in for the night? And she would say, oh yes, they're tucked in. But they were tucked in at the Betis family bar. And I also wanted to mention that Flo was a really big Packer fan. Her kids said that her husband would take her knitting needles from her on Sundays because she was so aggressive in how she didn't want her to injure anybody. And so then when she left her home and moved into assisted living, she decorated her walker with Packer gear, and then she decorated her wheelchair. So she was a real hero in our story and a Packer fan until the day she passed.
So this iconic picture, we think tells a great story of an image that Vince Lombardi was intentionally projecting. He's there in his suit, his expensive suit with a grin on his face, and these ladies behind him in their mink stoles that he gave them as a gift after the 1961 championship. And this picture was in Life magazine. I think, and actually Vince Lombardi Jr., who we interviewed for this, confirmed that He really knew exactly what he was doing with this picture. He wanted to project an air of sophistication and style, and that he did it from Green Bay, the smallest city in the NFL, I think is quite remarkable. I think he envisioned an NFL that appealed to the masses. And as we can see today, he achieved that goal. But I think this picture kind of tells that story as well.
And Ruth Ann Skoronsky told us that Bobby Knight once asked her how Vince Lombardi treats the wives, and she said, "Bobby Knight, have you ever known an Italian man who doesn't love women?" And I think another reason that he was so respectful of families and wives is because he was married to such a strong woman. And wags today know what they're getting into, whether they choose to be an influencer or not. But these women had no idea how the NFL was going to take off. And they didn't have someone to look to, but they did have Marie Lombardi, and she really is the coach of the team behind the team. And when we talked to Vince Lombardi Jr., I asked him what his dad loved most about his mom, and he said, I think what he loved most about her is that she stood up to him. And he talked about these very passionate debates where she would stand on the coffee table and argue her point, and he would argue hers, and they would still end passionately, but on very much loving terms, and loved hearing about that. So I'm just going to read a little part of our Marie Lombardi chapter. Always ready to deliver a wry remark in her smoky New Jersey accent, Marie Lombardi rarely stayed quiet. Tall and fashionable, she walked with high heels that sometimes sank into the football field's turf. But Marie stood firm in her commitment to her husband and the team he came to define. She was the original Lambeau Lady. Much has been written about the legendary coach's striking wife, but her closest girlfriends provide a more personal perspective. During her time in Green Bay, Marie came to rely on the wives of the players her husband coached, and they became some of her most cherished confidants. As transplants from all over the country, these families needed a lighthouse to guide them. By the time Vince accepted the head coaching position for the Packers in 1959, the Lombardis were 19 years into their marriage, and Marie was 25 years into a life that revolved around football. She had plenty of familial and football-related wisdom to share. Long after her days as the wife of a player and coach, Barbara Gregg, wife of Forrest Gregg, remembered Marie's advice after a loss. "Don't hold your head down," Barbara called Marie, telling the wives. "When you lose, just hold that head up, because you are going to win."
So this is another iconic picture. It was part of an exhibit at the Neville Public Museum. We love this picture for lots of reasons. One is that my mom and Ruth are in it, and they think it's hilarious because of their bouffant hairdos, but it also tells a story. This was in 1966, the middle of the Civil Rights Movement, and these ladies were negotiating that as well. Also, though, we just really love Ruth Pitts. She was a coach's wife, she was a player's wife, she was a special education teacher, and we interviewed her multiple times because she was a great interview. And in one of our later interviews, we learned that she was a disc jockey. She had a dream to host a radio show, and she did it in Buffalo. She hosted a jazz radio show on Sunday nights. So one thing we loved about writing this book is getting to know who these women were outside of football as well.
And next slide. Another woman we loved learning more about was Barbara Adderley. I pulled this article. We did all of the interviews, but we also pulled lots of articles from the 60s and found it funny that all of them don't list the wives' names. They are Mrs. Herb Adderley, Mrs. Ron Kostelnik. And I love seeing these pictures of Barbara, Herb, and their daughter, Tony. Next slide. And then she gave us some pictures telling us about their love story. But Barbara also had a love of teaching, a deep love of teaching. So when she arrived in Green Bay, she knew right away she would be teaching. And this is the 60s. She's one of the first black teachers in Green Bay. And she said the only person who gave her a side-eye was her husband, Herb. He was like, "Why do you want to work?" And she's like, "Because I love it, like you love football." And so he went off to play football, and she taught. And she said that she loved her students. She loved teaching, and sometimes she would see people peeking through the window of her classroom watching her teach, and she didn't know whether it was because she was one of the first black teachers in Green Bay or because she was Herb Adderley's wife, because everybody knew who the football players were then. But she didn't care because she just loved her students so much. And she went on to become a superintendent in Philadelphia and had a reputation for turning around troubled schools. And she became our friend. We chat a lot, and she's wonderful. So that was a real treat of this project, too.
So we put this picture back up again because the peeking in the window at the classroom was just a little indication of the type of fame these ladies experienced that they didn't really expect to. They landed in Green Bay just expecting to be wives, and they ended up doing fashion shows and shooting commercials and a lot of fun things. And Katherine is going to tell you one very funny story.
Yes, Marilyn Hart, the former wife of Doug Hart, talked about being in a hot dog commercial. And the crew showed up to her house, and she and the other wife were pregnant, and they didn't know that. And the director was like, oh no, we can't put you guys on TV because then people will think if you eat hot dogs, you'll become pregnant. So the director put a table in front of them to block their pregnant bellies. And then my mom was in a commercial in the 1960s as well.
I have the most Wisconsin story about shooting a commercial that you will ever hear, because my mom, Deb, my brother Mike, and I shot a Morning Glory milk commercial. No. They came into our kitchen and they taped a script up, and my dad read the script, and my mom was at the sink washing some dishes, and my brother and I had to pick up our glasses of milk and drink it and set it back down, and we had little milk mustaches, and this was before the Got Milk thing. But the thing that I think is the funniest is that we got paid in a year's supply of all the dairy products. I don't know how many of you remember having a milk box in the back of your house. Okay, so where the delivery guy would come once a week, and we had a little checklist that we got to check off whatever products we want. So for that year, we had chocolate milk and fudgesicles and ice cream. It was delightful. And the other thing is that we lived in this cute neighborhood, and so whenever that commercial aired, somebody would yell, the commercial's on, and we would go run in and watch it.
Next slide. Yes, another woman we loved learning more about was Cherry Starr. This is Cherry right there in the swimsuit. And we knew some about Cherry, and we were looking forward to chatting with her. And we knew she was very classy, very well dressed at all times. And so when we had scheduled our Zoom, we dressed up a little bit and logged on. And unfortunately, her assistant came on and said that she was really looking forward to chatting about this, but she wasn't feeling well, and could we push a few days? And sadly, she passed away a couple days later. But that moment really strengthened our resolve to tell these stories, because we know that the stories outlive the people. And we want to make sure we keep honoring these wonderful women. And we got to talk to Bart Starr Jr. about his mom, and he really shed some light on her deep sense of humor. And he told this story about how his mom, she loved to prank people, and she hated pretentiousness. He said how she phrased it was, she hated when people behaved like a butt. And once Bart Starr became a coach, she went to a lot of events where there were some pretentious people. And she was at an event in Chicago, and this woman was bragging about her art collection. And Cherry couldn't take it. She was getting very irritated. And so she told her to look the other way, and then she pulled a rubber cockroach out of her purse and put it in the woman's salad. And then the woman turned back around and started eating, and then screamed, and Cherry went, oh my goodness, where did that come from? And Bart was next to her. He saw the whole thing play out and was like, oh my God. And that was lovely to hear about Cherry, is how funny she was.
Speaking of the Starrs and how wonderful they were and are, their legacy, I have a letter Bart Starr wrote to me when I was a little girl that I just wanted to read. He said, Dear Laura, recently I was given a letter you had written concerning the Green Bay Packers. May I just compliment you on your imagination and storytelling ability? It looks as though you will be on your way to becoming a scriptwriter. My only regret is that I wasn't quite as tough as you had me depicted. Since your father was a big, strong defensive tackle, I am sure he could tell you that he was much stronger than any quarterback he'd ever met. Thank you again for writing. Best wishes. Sincerely, Bart Starr. So what a guy, right? Write a little girl that letter? I thought that was wonderful. Actually, while I have my reading glasses on, another woman we featured and who just played a very pivotal role in our lives was Olive Jordan. She is on the cover of the book. And the passage I wanted to read is about her because it tells a lot about her, but it also is a good picture of that time and the community that they built then. They called her Ma Jordan, and they sprawled out, sweaty, hungry, and tired, in her kitchen during breaks between Coach Lombardi's vaunted two-a-day preseason practices. Like many Packer wives who lived on Careful Drive during the 1960s, Olive Jordan kept her kitchen stocked and her doors unlocked, ready to host all comers, rookies, veterans, even the recruits and their families. The players often showed up for sustenance and support midway through their 2 daily practices. My mom really liked to cook, and she was a good cook, Olive's oldest daughter, Teresa Jordan Hagerman, said. My dad would invite a lot of the single guys over, and you'd come into the house and there would be all these huge guys either eating or asleep in the den, and then my mom would wake them all up and they'd go back to practice. Players didn't have dietitians or nutritionists back then, but many of them did have other secret weapons, their wives, and the food those women whipped up to get them back on the field. Olive's special concoction included her own method of sodium replacement. She would make these Spam sandwiches, which sound disgusting, but she would have those Spam sandwiches with egg and everything, and the guys would love those, Teresa said. I would say, Mom, that's gross. And she said they loved them because they had salt. Olive's son, Henry Jordan, remembered a happy chaos that enveloped the neighborhood and bubbled up from their house where everyone felt at home. I have pictures of Packers wide receiver Max McGee sleeping on the floor with my dog, he said. Well, the Jordan house was a hub.
And next slide. So we loved learning about these women, and when we interviewed them, we recorded all of their voices. And it was a real treat to hear these stories directly from them. And so I suggested to my mom that we put together a podcast, a narrative podcast, so that we could feature these voices and put together some of the themes of the book. And when I started working with an editor and seeing the names come together in the audio track, it felt like I was putting these women back together into a big party from the 1960s, and these women were great at partying. So it was a real treat to work on that, and you hear their dialects from all over the country, the Texas bells, New York sophistication, the Wisconsin accents, and you'll hear them all together in 6 episodes, comes out once a week. The Ice Bowl episode is already out, how the other side of the Ice Bowl story, how these women survived one of the coldest games in the NFL, and that's all at Lambeau Ladies on all platforms, and it was a real treat to put together.
Next week is the love stories. Right?
Next week is the love stories, both of their partners and of the game of football.
So it's a treat to have those voices recorded, but we also, even better, we have a live Lambeau lady here with us. So I would like to invite my mom, Peggy Kostelnik, to come up, and Katherine and I are going to interview her like we interviewed some of the ladies in preparation for the book. Tennis coach is one of the people here, so she's a very very active. Okay, Mom, what was your first impression of Green Bay? My mom came from Cincinnati, Ohio, so.
And when I came from Cincinnati, Ohio, my grandma and all my relatives gave us, we had electric blanket upon electric blanket. They thought they didn't know where we were going, and I didn't know where I was going. When I got to Green Bay, we rented an apartment, and the neighbors across the street immediately took us in and showed us where to go. And then I went to my first practice. And But before I tell that story, when I was 17, I was invited to Notre Dame for homecoming. And when I went, Paul Hornung was the quarterback. That dance that night, Paul Hornung came in and he was the homecoming king. And I was 17, I'm like, so then, Ron came off the field at first practice and said, can you drive me to the doctor's? And would you take him too? And when I looked, it was Paul Hornung, the very first person I met from the Packers. So I was very thrilled.
Okay, so Green Bay hosted the draft this year, and it was quite an extravaganza. Katherine and I went. It was fun, but it was a big, big deal. How does that compare to your draft experience with Dad?
Well, Ron had just played in the North-South game. And when he came, he wanted me then to go to Culver, Pennsylvania and meet his parents. So we were on the train. He had no thought ever of playing professional football. He never even discussed it. And we got off the train in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and Coach Bingston was standing there at the train station with all these reporters. And that's when we learned that while we were on the train, he had been drafted in the second round. Then we got to Culver, and that's a small town, a coal mining town in Pennsylvania, and every house probably had a relative of his, and then every house had somebody out on the porch. So anyway, and that's when we found out. And I do want to add one more thing.
Sure.
Herb Adderley at the same time played in the East-West game, and he came out of the game, and same thing, coaches, and they were standing there, and he was the first-round draft choice, and he signed on the hood of his car. That's the difference.
Yeah. It was a little lower key back then.
Yeah, a little lower, yes.
So I would like to say this. This book and the podcast is about friendship, and it means a lot to me to see all of our friends, so many of our friends here. It's just such a treat. And I wanted to ask you too, Mom. Friendship is, we made new friends too. I wanted to mention Mike and Mart and Katie. I just really appreciate all your help with this. It's been great. But friendship for you it was a necessity, I think, maybe.
A necessity, right. Like Ruth Pitts and I were very good friends, but when I had to go to the hospital one night, then she had to take Mike, and then Jean Norton took you. And I mean, we just had to do that, step in for each other all the time. And Cherry Starr, once I was invited to a very elegant affair, and I called her and said, can you help me pick out an outfit? She said, come over here. And she picked out the most beautiful dress. It had lace down in it, green velvet, and I wore it. And that's what we all did for one another. I didn't give Cherry dresses, but she did.
I guess, do you have any questions for Grandma?
Well, I was just going to have you say, you have that tennis bracelet. Can you just...
Well, the charm bracelet, I was going to ask you too about your jewelry because, can you describe your Packer jewelry that you're wearing?
These are all gifts from
I know.
Vince Lombardi. We got a ring, and we got a necklace, I don't know which is a
Lavalier.
This is a Super Bowl.
So when the Packers won the second Super Bowl, the men got a ring and the ladies got a ring as well. And that is the ring that the ladies got. And then also the men had the opportunity to purchase a charm bracelet for their wives. And they would add footballs to the charm bracelets as the championships. So many, in fact, if you listen to the podcast, you're going to hear like a tinkling sound when Dana Caffey is talking, and that is her bracelet. in the mic.
Our bracelet.
Yeah. So we can open it up to questions now. If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay.
Also, well, maybe you can think of, if you have any questions, you can still think of it for a second. One thing we did in the podcast with all of our interviewees is play a quick game. So we'll loosen up the crowd. Sometimes it's hard to, you think you're gonna get roasted by a comedian if you talk, but I promise you won't with this one. So I'm gonna just do our 2-minute warning game that we did for all of our interviewees. So you can just yell these out. Just the first thing that comes to your head, these are football and Wisconsin questions. So, brandy old-fashioned or whiskey old-fashioned? Brandy. Okay, yes, consensus. Sweet or sour? Sweet. Oh, I hear both, okay. Favorite Wisconsin meal? Cheeseburgers, mac and cheese. Fish fry, yes, heard a lot of that. Okay, here we go. Bubbler or water fountain? Bubbler. Oh, okay, definitely bubbler, got it. Sheep's head or cribbage? Sheep's head, okay. Finish this sentence. When I think of Green Bay, Wisconsin, I feel happy. I heard a lot of happy. Warm. Couple people said cold. Very fair. Favorite type of cheese? Swiss, cheddar. Mine's smoked Gouda, but I'll take all of them. Okay, this is some trivia from the 1960s. Which player was most likely to break curfew? Max McGee. Paul Hornung, is that right, Greg? Max McGee. Which player was most likely to show up at dinner time? Grandma?
Mark Fleming. I know Tony Anderson talks about that, so, Mark Fleming for me.
Yes. They actually answered all of the players in the interviews. Okay, which wife was most likely to host a gathering?
Olive Jordan.
Jordan, Cherry. Which NFL team do you like to beat the most? Bears. The Bears. Favorite Packer player ever? Okay, you're on the Packers. Coach says be there by noon. What time do you get there? Okay, I heard a lot of 11:45. That's correct. That's Lombardi time. Okay, finish this cheer. Go, Pack. Go! Yes! Okay, great. Great job. Thank you so much. Do you want to come up and ask anything?
Sure. Let's hear it for the Lambeau Ladies.